Let's return for a second to southwestern Africa. What do we find when we go and look? Well, we find an interesting tradition where people's clothes are woven together. These clothing, if you can tell, are woven from palm. They're called raffia cloth. But how old is this raffia cloth? Is it something recent? Is it something that was built long time ago? Some suggestions say that the tradition of linen and the tradition of cotton coming from other parts of the world inspired these people to weave this cloth. If this is true, then that is a very interesting thing. But can we find evidence of someone talking about the fact that these people took the palm tree and made clothing earlier than any date that has been given? The dates that have been given range from the first century AD to about the third or fourth. This is interesting, but it probably does not represent the truth. But if Africa is lacking of writing from this era, how could we possibly know exactly when this started? Well, of course, we could look back and see exactly when palm trees were in use. Suggestions by historians go back thousands of years before that date. Weaving is unknown exactly when it came to that region, but we can look at other people's writings. For ancient people like Herodotus, when describing Ethiopians, he either says they dress equivalent to the Ethiopians in linen and in some cases other fibers, but never mentioning the palm. What he does mention, though, is that some of the Ethiopians still wear animal skins. And of course, because this is what he saw, there's no need to judge him or judge his writings about this. But there's something strange that happens when he starts to describe people far away from the typical Ethiopian regions. When describing Libya, the continent of Africa, he describes a man from Persia who is tasked with traveling around Africa, starting from Egypt and going through the Pillars of Hercules, the narrow band between Africa and Europe. He then describes this man as sailing a couple months, being beaten back by the waves. Needing a rest, he stops on a West African coast. He has no idea exactly where he is, but he realizes that there are men in this area. He notices two groups of people. One, a much larger people, who he says are hostile and he did not dare to go anywhere near. The second group he describes are a group of pygmy like people, short in stature, who build clothing out of the palm. But he does not call them clothing, but instead garments. This is different than just taking strips and laying them on your body as some people do. Also, it wasn't very common in anywhere in the old world to really create these clothes out of this. You see this in America, in the Austronesian areas, some parts of India, and basically that's where you get this type of palm fiber being used for the most part. So it's interesting that instead of naming the common dresses that the Ethiopians wear, he discusses the exact clothing that is still found in those locations. Now, of course, I'm not suggesting that the people he ran into were the Kuba kingdom located in Congo, but I'm showing these examples to show that there is a long history that existed in that area. Could Herodotus have been recounting a real story? Is he just telling something that actually happened? Some historians say the story is correct, though some parts are probably exaggerated. And some say the continuity or the consistency of that part of the world when it comes to exploring happens over and over again in the same way, where people bravely try to go around Africa, but then when they reach the West or West Africa, the seas are too rough and they turn around. Keep in mind, south of Guinea, in places like Congo, in places like Equatorial Guinea, and places like that, a lot of people did not ever sail to these regions. Now, the other Africans were aware because you can simply walk to these places, which is fairly impressive, but it's not exactly as hard a task as sailing from the top Morocco all the way down. That's why even people from Morocco had no idea that there was such an important place south of where they were. Yet customs let us know that everything about these cultures were practically identical. Medicines that are reported are identical, clothing styles are identical, patterns woven are identical, meanings are identical. Everything is the same, which lets us know that these kingdoms are separated in time but connected in culture, separated in time and space, but connected in culture. Their spirituality and everything else seems to be the same. So let's bring this text of Herodotus and see if it's exactly as I say it is. Relax, we're not going to read this whole thing, but let's look at the title first because it's very important. Circumnavigation of Africa. Now, I know you're thinking we've already seen this. This is a different part of Herodotus talking about the very same circumnavigation, but it's not the same. It's more detail. So we will go down and zoom. So let's start here. Subsequently, the Carthaginians say that Libya is surrounded by water. For Satispas, son of Tispus, one of the Archimedi, did not sail around Libya, though sent for that very purpose, but dreading the length of the voyage and the desolation, returned home and did not accomplish the task which his mother imposed upon him, for he had violated a virgin, daughter of Zopyrus, son of Megabus. Whereupon, when he was about to be impaled for this offense by King Xerxes, the mother of Setipus, who was sister to Darius, begged him off, promising that she would inflict a greater punishment upon him than he would, for she would constrain him to sail round Libya, until sailing round he should reach the Arabian Gulf. Xerxes having agreed on these terms, Satispas went into Egypt, and having taken a ship of men from thence, sailed through the Pillars of Hercules. That's that round trip. So he's not going from the east to west, he's going east to west from the north. And having sailed through and doubled the Cape of Libya, whose name is Solis, he steered to the southward But after traversing a vast extent of sea in many months, when he found that he had still more to pass, he turned back and sailed away from Egypt. From thence, going to King Xerxes, he told him that in the most distant part he sailed past a nation of little men who wore garments made of palm leaves, who, whenever they drew to shore, left their cities and flew to the mountains, that his men, when they entered their country, did them no injury, but only took some cattle from them. Of his not sailing completely around Libya, this he said was the cause that the ship could not proceed any further, but was stopped. Xerxes, however, being persuaded that he did not speak the truth, as he had not accomplished the task imposed upon him, impaled him, inflicted the original sentence. A eunuch of this satrapas, as soon as he heard of his master's death, ran away to Samos with great wealth. Okay, so let's revisit the part where he lands in Africa and talks about how he met a bunch of little people who were wearing palm. So here it says, from thence going to King Xerxes, he told him that in the most distant part he sailed past a nation of little men. So means the furthest he went, he saw some little people who wore garments made of palm leaves. Again, remember how not common wearing palm leaves is, and he is guessing that they wore these depending on what part of Africa he was. And remember, it said he went about twice the distance. So in other words, he would probably be somewhere around Equatorial Guinea, or he might even be as low as, the parts of Congo, who, whenever they drew to shore, left their cities and flew to the mountains. There's something about that is true of the Africans. First of all, they live on the mountains, and they have cities that are, or the main areas are in flatlands, but the the important places, the bases, the fortresses are all on mountainous regions. That his men, when they entered their country, did them no injury. Very interesting. But only took some cattle from them. This suggests that the people that he is encountering are not a hunter gatherer type of species or type of people. Firstly, he says they are cities. I know this does not necessarily mean they have giant cities like a city, but meaning that they have a residential domain, a area where they populate. So I'm not even going to take that to mean anything bigger than that. But the parts that interest me is the fact that he mentions that they care about cattle, right? Which narrows down what type of people it could be. More like the Bantu type of pygmies, or the Niger Bantu type of pygmies, or the Khoisan people. The Khoikhoi could be a good candidate. Remember, the Khoikhoi were also located as high as Congo and as high as basically Congo in the past, and they were in the west of Africa more than they were in the east, even though they were in the east as well. Now, this story, if it's true, is interesting, but it's possible that, again, it's just a story based on some ideas or realities that were known about those regions, and then you put it together, make a coherent story, and then you're done. But I actually think that this story holds a lot of truth in it. 500 years later, the Romans will start to talk about exact places in West Africa in detail, mentioning, as you can see in the black here, that the first place that you can touch from the north of Africa going south, where rhinos are to be found and Ethiopians at the same time, is in the basin of Chad. But that's a story for another day.